Once Upon a Crime, Chapter 11, Part 2. The three crept out of the inn and into the stables. The stable boy was given another coin to buy his silence and advised to make himself scarce before the missing horse was noticed. Christina had clearly been won over by Hans, and a flask of beer, a small canvas bag of food, and a sack of clothing were in their trap. Gretel handed out garments, each one filthier and more grim than the last. "Great heavens, Hans, I suggested farmers, not vagrants," she said. "Farmers or some such were your actual words, if I recall, which I'm pretty much certain I do." "Very well, you can take this," she said, thrusting a greasy greatcoat at him. "Here, Roland, there's a passable jacket and a cap and a muffler." She wrapped it round his neck. The boy looked suddenly terribly young to be entrusted with such a task. The night wind whined around the little barn, its icy fingers seeking out bare flesh through every crack and gap in the weathered boards. "Take care," she told him, and gave him a leg up onto the fidgeting horse. "Speed is important, but it is a dark night and the road is rough and uneven." She caught herself revealing her concern and altered her manner. "Only remember, you are no good to anyone, least of all me, dead in a ditch somewhere." "I will remember, Fraulein. Do not fear for me, but be wary of the giant. He can be courteous, almost solicitous, but he has a vile temper and does not heed his own strength." The stable boy opened the rattling wooden door, and they watched Roland gallop into the night. "Right," Gretel marched forward towards Frau Peterson's fat bay mare. "You, my dear, are coming with us." With Hans's help she manoeuvred the animal between the shafts of the trap. They repacked their few possessions and provisions. Hans's movements were slightly hampered by the length of his greatcoat, which had clearly been cut for a taller make of man and one with a more slender girth. The selvages did not quite meet, but had to be held together with a stiff leather belt. Gretel recoiled at his choice of headgear. "Scoff all you like," he told her, adjusting the dangling ear flaps on the brown lambswool bonnet so that it covered as much of his head and neck as possible. "I will be warm." Gretel's own outfit comprised of a pinafore of some sort of red felted wool, fur-lined boots at least one size too big, and a pair of leathery mittens. She put everything on top of her own cotton dress and topped off the ensemble with the cape she was very glad to have snatched from the hallway as she fled from Gestonstadt. What a long time ago it all seemed now. "Haven't you a hat?" asked Hans. "The wind will be bitter." Gretel dug deeper in the sack in which the clothes had been stashed. At the bottom her hand met something soft and fluffy, making her shriek. She forced herself to pull it out. It was a deep-crowned black hat made of the fur of an animal that must have inhabited a place of fearsomely low temperatures, so thick and bushy was its pelt. Gretel jammed it onto her head. Hans stifled a guffaw. "Don't," she warned him. "Just do not." Hans climbed aboard. "Let's go," he said. "I wouldn't want Inga, whatever her name is, and her merry men catching us taking their nag." The stable boy held open the door once more. The night outside looked ever more bleak and inhospitable. "One more thing," said Gretel. She stepped over to Inga's wagon, reached inside and pulled out a cage of cats. She hurried back to the trap and buried them beneath the sacking. "What the devil do we want with those?" said Hans. "I thought we were going to rescue cats, get them out, not take them in." "These," said Gretel, patting the angular shape beneath the Hessian, "are our ticket into the castle." She hauled herself into the trap beside Hans and took up the reins. She flicked them across the broad mare's broad rump. "On you go, old girl." The horse did not move. "Ja, hup, hup, on with you." The animal remained where it stood, its feet firmly planted on the dusty floor of the barn, its ears flat back, giving it an exceptionally bad-tempered expression. "She doesn't like the look of it out there," said Hans, "and I can't say I blame her." Gretel slapped the reins smartly down on the mare's backside twice more, but nothing would induce the creature to take a step. "Hans, you'll have to get down and lead her." "Why me? Just do it. She probably needs a bit of encouragement to get her started." Muttering complaints, Hans climbed down. He took hold of the bridle and pulled while Gretel made vaguely threatening noises from the trap. "It's no use," Hans told her. "She simply isn't going to move." Gretel called to the stable boy, "Find me a whip." "No," Hans was horrified. "You can't whip the poor thing." "This is not the time for sentiment," said Gretel. "If she won't be persuaded, she must be forced." "Wait a moment," said Hans, digging into a trouser pocket. Let me try something." Gretel craned her neck to see what he was doing, but her view was obscured by the mare's bulky shape. Hans appeared to whisper in the animal's ear for a moment, and then feed her some small tidbit. The horse chomped thoughtfully, and then nuzzled him for more. "Try now," he called back to Gretel, tugging gently at the bridle. The mare hesitated, and then began to shuffle forwards. Hans fed her a morsel more. Her ears took up a more cheerful position, and she gave a little swish of her tail. "Get back in, Hans, quickly." He scrambled aboard. Gretel clicked her tongue, and the horse at last leaned into the collar and set off down the road. Whatever treat Hans had found for her had woken her up sufficiently to discover that her new cargo was considerably lighter than the heavy wagon she had been accustomed to pulling. Soon they were jogging along with the trap swinging slightly to the rhythm of the mare's short but purposeful stride. "What on earth did you give her, Hans?" "Oh, just a little toffee." "Toffee? All the vile food we've had to endure, and you have been in possession of a secret supply of toffee. Come on, Gretel, it's just a few chunks. Not enough to go round, really." He was silenced by her hard stare. The road climbed ever upward, the temperature dropping with each vertiginous bend. It was as if they were entering territory so remote, so inhospitable, so devoid of redeeming features that even spring did not trouble itself to visit. The land became rocky and sparsely treed. Here and there a lost sheep dug at the frozen earth to get at the very roots of the shrivelling grass, so little sustenance was there to be found above ground. The night sky was cloudless, and a cold moon lit their progress. They were travelling into a cruel wind that seemed intent on pushing them back down the hill, snatching away their breath in clouds, tugging at any uncovered hair, and stinging their faces until their eyes watered. Gretel felt the chill of doubt creeping into her mind. What if Inge caught up to them in this desolate place? What if the giant merely snatched the cats from her and refused to admit her to the cave castle? What if he did let her in, and then... And what if Roland failed to reach the summer schloss and return with Ferdinand von Ferdinand in time? She shook such thoughts away. No good would come of dwelling on them. Flicking the reins and clicking her tongue, she urged the mare on. According to Roland's map, even at such a pedestrian speed, they should be in sight of the giant's abode before dawn. As the miles jogged by, Gretel allowed her thoughts to wander. She found, even amid the peril and uncertainty she faced, that there was one detail of her immediate future that was giving her a little inner lift, a definite spark of enthusiasm, a minuscule frisson of excitement. It was the prospect of once again being in the company of Ober-General Ferdinand von Ferdinand. She tutted at her own foolishness. The man had given her no definite reason to believe he was interested in her beyond the requirements of his position as aide to King Julian. It was nonsense, therefore, to allow herself to entertain girlish notions of what-ifs and I-wonders. And yet, there had been a special glance here, a lingering look there, perhaps even the teeniest spark passing between them. "Look!" cried Hans, hoarse from the cold. "Look at that!" Gretel pulled herself from her reverie and focused on the cause of her brother's excitement. They had rounded another hairpin bend, and revealed before them was a great wall of rock, a towering mountain of stone that seemed to vanish upwards into the dawn-lit skies. There was not a tree or a bush to relieve the unyielding, sheer face of the hillside, only hideous gargoyles at irregular intervals, finials of stone and iron, heavy bars across inaccessibly high windows, and one single magnificent portal. Taller than a house, the gigantic double doors were constructed of huge timbers, strapped together with steel, hinged and studded with iron. These were doors for keeping shut, doors for keeping people out, and quite possibly doors for keeping people in. What they most evidently were not for was doors that encouraged flimsy strangers to knock upon them in pursuit of a harebrained scheme of short planning and unlikely success. Even the wind that had accompanied Hans and Gretel on their journey took fright and disappeared. She was suddenly reminded of how long it had been since she had had the opportunity to spend time in her own safe water closet. Her bowels rumbled ominously. The grey sky glowered ominously. Nearby, a crow cawed ominously. She raised her chin, set her jaw, and did her utmost to shut out such things. "Good Lord," said Hans. That looks ominous. Gretel scowled at him. It is a door into a cave. That is precisely what we were told to expect. Yes, but what a door? What a cave? It is simply a matter of scale, she said. We are calling upon a giant, not an elf. Pity, said Hans. Elf sounds rather good to me just now, quite like elves. Small fellows, not in the least threatening or terrifying, don't look for a minute like they might pull off one's limbs and devour one for dinner. Hans. Yes? Be quiet. They manoeuvred the trap until it was hidden behind a smaller lump of rock. Gretel quickly ate a little weisswurst, lamenting the lack of mustard, and chomped through a stale cracker, washing it all down with a swig of ale. It tasted unhelpfully weak and watery, so that she found herself recalling the troll's grog quite fondly. She emptied the canvas bag and slipped it over her head and shoulder, but beneath her cape. Picking up the basket of cats, she addressed Hans in her best do-as-I-tell-you tones. Stay here. Do not leave the horse and trap. Eat something. Walk about a bit if you must to keep warm, but do not stray from this spot. Wait for me. But how long will you be? And how will I know if you're all right or if you need rescuing? Hans asked, sounding all of 5 years old. Gretel resisted telling him that among his many and various talents, rescuing did not feature. Truth had its place, but it was farther down the mountain and at some distance away from where they currently found themselves. I'm just going to see what I can see. It is important that you stay out of sight. When Inge and her men arrive, they must not see you, do you understand? Of course, Gretel, I'm not simple, you know. If they see you, they might well change their plans. This could be our only chance to prove our innocence, so stay hidden. Once Inge's lot have passed, look out for Roland. Do you really think he'll come? Hans asked. I mean, he's a fine young man and all that, but, well, it's a long way, and Ober-General Ferdinand von Ferdinand is a very busy man, I know. She paused and gave Hans's knee a firm pat. Have a little faith, brother dear. All will be well, she added, with considerably more conviction than she felt. The front doors of the giant's cave were even more forbidding close up. Gretel straightened her cape, adjusted her hat, which kept slipping down almost over her eyes, and reached up for the clunky knocker. When she rapped it against the weathered oak, she could hear the sound echoing through the cavernous space on the other side of the doors. There was a pause. Nothing. She knocked again. 4 loud, purposeful beats. As the echoes subsided, they were replaced by the thud, thud, thudding of gargantuan footsteps from within. As they drew closer, the ground beneath Gretel trembled with each mighty footfall. She was aware of her snack attempting to exit her body one way or the other as speedily as possible. The footsteps ceased. Just above her head, a window-sized spy hole within the doors was slid open. One powder-blue eye appeared, so vast that it filled the entire space. The eye swiveled to this side and that before lowering its gaze to fall upon Gretel. She waited, breath held, anticipating the thunderous voice that was surely about to bellow at her. It came as some surprise, therefore, when the giant spoke, for his voice was sweet, light, gentle almost, and his accents cultured. The whole effect was softened further by a pronounced lisp. "Who is it?" he asked, fixing upon Gretel. He tried again. "Who are you, and what brings you to my castle at this early hour, Fraulein?" Gretel's own voice seemed to have fled. She cleared her throat and willed herself to speak. "Cats," she said at last, holding up the basket. "I bring cats." The eye at the window widened. There was a long minute of bolts being drawn back and keys being turned. Finally, to the accompaniment of loud Gothic creaking, the great doors were opened. The giant stood on the threshold, every bit as huge and as terrifying as Gretel had feared, but much better dressed. True, his head was bulbous and misshapen, but he had covered the worst of it with a tasselled scarlet fez. Admittedly, his physique was alarmingly vast and muscular, but his expertly tailored suit of finest wool and a subtle lemon check, his green velvet waistcoat, his splendid fob watch and chain, his embroidered slippers, and the spotted silk cravat at his neck all did their bit to make him ultimately presentable. Acceptable. Faceable. Relief flushed through Gretel, strengthening her resolve. She risked a small businesslike smile and a tiny inclination of her head. "Good morning to you, Herr Giant," she said. "Please," the giant bowed low, though still remained double Gretel's own height. "Come in. You are most welcome to my humble home." Gretel stepped into the great hall and tried not to let a renewed panic show on her face as, with a clang that vibrated through her whole body, the impenetrable doors were shut, locked, bolted, and barred behind her. That's the end of chapter 11.